Everybody, I'm Trudy, One Grounded Angel. This is the weekly angel card reading video for the week December the 17th to the 23rd, 2018. We have a full moon on the 22nd in Cancer. So full moons are a time for release, a time for letting go, also a time to bring in the harvesting, if I could put it that way, of the goals that we set at the corresponding new moon 6 months ago, not the one 2 weeks ago, but the one that relates to that star sign 6 months ago. So that would be around mid-June, July. If you did set goals around that time, hopefully they're coming to fruition for you now. So Cancer is the sign of the matriarchy, of emotions, of home, of family. You could be having issues with your mother. If that's a long-running theme for you, they could be coming to a head at this point. Sorry. You could be having your own, if you are a woman watching this as a mother, you could be having some issues with parenting there. Maybe you're struggling or feeling overwhelmed. It could be that you're feeling particularly emotional when you have this massive outpouring of emotions that you can't really attribute to anything, although to be fair, it is a time of year when you've got every reason to be emotional. Tension is running high at this time of year. And family, any sort of family stuff could be coming up. So it is a female sign, so even issues with your female friends could come up. Anyway, I don't want to make it sound like it's a bad thing at all. It just means that, because it can be positive, it's not just like a tension, but sometimes if there are those underlying tensions, the full moon can be the time that they come to a head. But it also could be a time for you to focus on those things and not necessarily set goals around them. It's more of a new moon kind of thing, but maybe to be aware of what maybe where you need to bring your focus to. So let's start with Monday, the 17th of December. Perfect timing. This is basically the angels lighting a rocket under you. Yes, now is the time to get started on whatever you're thinking of doing. That might sound odd at this time of year when things tend to be coming to a close, particularly if you live in the Southern Hemisphere. It's summer. Things tend to shut down for a month or so around this time of year. But actually, it doesn't have to be work-related. This could be your personal goals. It's the perfect time to get started on those. I'm so sorry. Someone is mowing their lawns. I swear they weren't doing when I started recording this. So it's not ideal timing, but hopefully you guys can hear me okay. Perfect timing. So if you were wondering, I don't know if this is a good time, this card tells you yes, it is. Even though you've probably got a lot on your plate right now, it's time for you to get going. And the underlying, or I guess what I say, the conflict in this card is around procrastination. So if you're procrastinating on something, you're delaying, or you have been delaying it for a while, this card is really asking you to look at why. Because sometimes procrastination is often just a form of fear. We don't want to start because we're afraid we're going to fail. So you might like to look at what could be going on there with those delays. Let's go to Tuesday now, the 18th of December. Oh, that is so annoying. Can't even blame the Mercury retrograde for that. I will have a listen back to this when I'm finished recording, and if it's terrible, I will re-record. But if you're watching it, it obviously is more annoying for me than it is for you. Oh, Serenity. If you're in Australia and you'll know House of Serenity, it's a colloquialism from this part of the world. So Serenity is about peace, being at peace, and that is an excellent theme for this time of year. We all need that. So look at where you're in resistance to what's going on. Maybe you're trying to force something it's not meant to be. Maybe you're trying to forge ahead with some plans that really aren't meant to be. Now, I know that sounds somewhat contrary to this card here. Again, the difference comes down to your intuition. If you know something is right for you, then by all means go ahead. But if you're starting on something or trying to continue the status quo and you're getting resistance, then listen to that and go, how can I just be at peace here? Maybe I just need to surrender to how things actually are. The card is often a lot around grudges. If there's any kind of family, well, not necessarily family, I just said that because I guess I talked about the Cancer relationship there with the full moon. But any sort of conflicts going on, try not to let things rub you up the wrong way too much. I find the best thing is to set the bar low in terms of how things are going to go. When we're expecting the perfect hallmark Christmas, for example, we're really setting ourselves up for disappointment. A really good example of this is when you let someone in front of you in traffic, when you're in the car, and I know some people get really annoyed when that person doesn't give them a friendly wave back, which is sort of, in New Zealand, that's kind of expected. And my thing is, you can't get angry at people for not waving at you, because you can't do something with the expectation of them treating you kindly and then feel like you shouldn't have done it if they don't reciprocate with that. You can't expect people to respond in the way that you would hope for them to respond. If you're leading someone in traffic, you're doing it because it's the right thing to do, not necessarily because you want them to be grateful to you. So just look at where your expectations might be blocking you from being in a state of serenity. Obviously, we can't live in a state of serenity. It's a temporary state, just like happiness and all emotions, in fact. But this asks you where you are contributing to not being at peace, if that makes sense. So where you're causing your own kind of tension at the moment. And as I said, by trying to force things to be something they're not, or expecting them to be something different than what they are. I'm not saying expect the worst. Never. I would never say that. I'm all about optimism. I'm going to grab a new card deck. The ones I'm shuffling are not working. I'm all about optimism, but you also have to be realistic in terms of allowing people to meet you where they're at. Wednesday, animals. This is always an unusual card for me. I have to say I do struggle when it comes up, because I know there are so many people who will look at this and it just won't mean anything to them. So the meanings are, if you have a pet who has passed on, it is the animal saying hello to you, especially if it's one that you miss very much. The other thing is, if you have it's about having a bond with animals. So if you're someone who does have that bond, spending time with more animals more often will really help you right now, particularly if you're feeling stressed and really struggling. The other thing is, it does come up for people who need to be working with animals more, not necessarily professionally, perhaps in a voluntary capacity. So just think about how that could relate to you. And the other thing is, I try to widen this a bit more so it does relate to people, even if they don't really think of themselves as animal people. And I would say a bond with nature, or not a bond, but a need to be around nature. We all have a connection with nature. You're not someone, just because you live in a city and you very seldom see trees doesn't mean that you are someone who doesn't need that. We all, our energy fields respond really well to being around natural elements, particularly the ocean, bodies of water, but also just around trees and birds and things that are living. So it would be a really good idea for you to spend some time outside. And I know that's not always realistic, depending on the climate or where you are, but we can always find ways to do that. Yeah. Oh, Thursday. I love it when a card just jumps out nice and cleanly like that. Prosperity. Now, we tend to think of prosperity as being money. If you look at this card, there is gold coming out of this cornucopia, I guess. But it's not necessarily. Prosperity it's about your material needs. So basically, food, shelter, yes, money, of course. We do need money. And a lot of people, if you grew up with the saying, money is the root of all evil, that's not necessarily the case. Money isn't a bad thing at all. So if you do have any negative associations with money, you might find that is inadvertently blocking you from attracting it. Money is not inherently bad, but some people do sort of glorify it and worship it, and that's when you can certainly come unstuck. But if you're watching this, I don't think you're the sort of person who would do that. But certainly, whenever there's a card around abundance or prosperity, I do like to talk about people's underlying beliefs around money, and that can be one of them. Prosperity, essentially, it's just about understanding that all your needs are going to be provided for. All your material needs are being looked after. If you have massive fears of losing everything, perhaps you grew up in poverty, or perhaps you just grew up with a fear of it for reasons you can't even explain, there might be some work you need to do around that, because what we are afraid of, we're investing energy into our fears, we're bringing ourselves closer to them, and that's obviously not ideal. So that might be something you like to look at. Prosperity, it's letting you know you're being taken care of. So it's a very uplifting, affirming message. Let's go to Friday now. I don't know if this is the right one. We'll see. Actually, it's not. It's not. Let's move on. Friday. This beautiful card deck. Some of these card decks have a really weird kind of texture to them, and I find them harder to shuffle than others, not making excuses for my clumsiness, of course. Thinker. Okay, so a couple of things come up with this card. Oh, it's so beautiful. The first thing is a need for self-reflection. So something I find with people I do energy healing on is there are quite often a lot of people who deliberately keep themselves so busy they don't have time to think. And that's because they're trying to avoid something. It might be they're going out all the time. They might be using, some people might be using substances. That's not necessarily the sort of people I see, but the people who take on much, much more work than they've got time for, and then they say yes to every family obligation going, and then they position themselves as the one that everybody calls on for help. Now, there are a lot of things going on with that sort of lack of boundaries and that overcommitting, but one thing that does come up is sometimes it's people who deliberately keep themselves busy because they don't want to do the work on themselves or to examine some wound or, when we are not able to have any self-reflection, we're not able to make progress in our personal growth, and we will keep attracting the same things and we will stay stuck. So if you are someone who has to run around doing things all the time, even on holiday you're trying to work, you can't just sit down and do nothing, and we live in an age, the age of distraction, where there is so much to distract us, but this need for self-reflection has never been greater, because that is how you get answers. That is how you tune into your intuition. That is how you get clarity. You won't get it from running around completing tasks. You won't. So you might like to look at anything that's stopping you from doing any thinking, or alternatively, you might be an overthinker. That's the other thing that can come up with this card, and I'll try to remember to write about both when I do post this on social media. Sometimes we create more problems than are actually there because we're overthinking everything, particularly if the thoughts we're thinking about relate to what do other people think of me, or how does this look to others. That is a big brain game that you just can't win. So look at what... One thing that I love about meditation is it does teach you to be more of an observer of your thoughts. Sometimes it feels like our thoughts are this like Japanese bullet train that keeps going and you can't control it and it won't slow down. But when you start to do things like meditation, which of course is a form of self-reflection to some extent, you become more you become more active actually. You notice your thoughts, you're more of an observer. You're not just being yanked around by them, you're noticing where they're going. And it might be that it's absolute nonsense and you're suddenly aware of that. I'm worrying about a phone call that I made 2 years ago. I'm worried about something that's probably not going to happen. I'm thinking about work when this happens to me at night sometimes, I actually will have enough time in the morning to do the work. I don't need to start thinking about it right now. So maybe challenge any unhelpful thought patterns that are going on there. So Saturday, I don't know that we can ever really stop our thoughts. Well, I know we definitely can't, but I do know even if we can't necessarily stop our brains from going into that nonsense kind of overthinking, we can learn to halt the train when it's coming up and go, I'm not going to do this now, and now I'm going to change tracks. Saturday, practice makes perfect. So there's a couple of things with this card, aren't there always? So it does tell you, it's really a patience card. It does tell you that you need to keep going with what you're working on, and it's asking you to look at the long game, to not be discouraged at things if you're not getting instant results. You need to keep going, and if the work that you are doing towards your goals is going to be fruitful. So just because you're not getting results, don't think that it's not helping. Keep going. And I talk about this a lot, but we can only ever see this much of the puzzle, but the angels can see all of it, and they know it's going to be okay. So you need to keep going so you can get there. And try to keep your spirits up as you do that. It's normal to have setbacks, and we need to be able to pick ourselves up and go, okay, well, now I'm going to keep going. I have to admit, I struggle with the word perfect on this card. I don't like the word perfect ever. And practice makes perfect is a saying that was always sort of uttered in my childhood by a lot of people, not just my family, certainly teachers. And I don't think it's helpful to focus on becoming perfect. But I do think the essence of this card is saying that if you practice, it's going to add up to something. So keep going. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get perfect, because if you were trying to become perfect, not only are you going to be sorely disappointed, but also you're going to be really discouraged if your practice is not perfect. So, meditation's a classic example. Meditation practice is very, very, really good. I'm not good at it. A lot of people aren't. You're not meant to be good at it. You keep doing it anyway. It's something that doesn't focus on the product or the result. It's a focus on the process and knowing that it is that unfolding is for your greatest good, even though you can't see, the benefits of that in the immediately. So Sunday, we're up to now the 23rd of December. Innocence. This is a card around two very toxic emotions, guilt and shame. So those show up in so many areas. It might be that those emotions are about you, the way you think of yourself. So it might be, it's a call to let go of those emotions and to see everyone, including yourself, as doing the best that they can. And it doesn't mean innocence as in you're not responsible for anything you've done, or, it's not trying to absolve you of responsibility for what you're doing or the consequences of that, but it is trying to say that try to cut yourself some slack and understand that you need to make mistakes in order to learn, and beating yourself up about that is not going to help. So look at anywhere where you might be holding guilt or shame or blame, etc., or that kind of unholy trinity. And it might be towards yourself. I'm getting strongly that it is for a lot of you, but it also might be towards another person. When this card comes up in a personal reading, it often is about their relationship to someone else, where they are blaming someone for ruining their life in a very dramatic sense, or someone for doing something that has adversely affected them in some way, and trying to, the card is about trying to understand that everybody's doing the best they can, even though they make very bad choices, and so do you. But that's just life, and we need to try and understand everybody is ultimately deserving of love, although we still need to set boundaries against bad behaviour, of course. And just because someone treats you badly and you can see that they are, you might be able to understand where they're coming from or have some compassion because of their background or their circumstances, obviously still that doesn't mean you need to condone their actions or allow them to do it again, particularly. So it's a bit of a push me, pull you type situation there, but what they're trying to say is if you can understand that someone still deserves love despite their bad choices, it will be easier for you to hold them and hold some peace towards them. But again, you're not letting them off the hook for what happened. Everybody is culpable for their actions. That's it. I know someone who consistently doesn't follow through with things and then gets angry at other people for the consequences of those. And, it's part of an ongoing narrative of the world is against me. And so she creates these situations that prove that unhelpful belief. But anyway, that's sort of an energy healer insight. But the point is we need to be responsible for what we do and to own it and to fix it, most importantly. And that's how we learn the lesson. But being angry at yourself or being guilty, feeling guilty, guilt is such a futile emotion. It really doesn't help you. Sometimes we think that we're punishing ourselves, and that's important because that means we're learning the lesson, but you don't really learn from feeling guilty. You just make yourself feel crappy. So you learn the lesson and you accept it and then you move on. So it's letting go of the toxic emotions around the act rather than, berating yourself, which doesn't do anything. So looking at the week, I don't think we've got any particular theme here at all. I suppose we could say, I always do this, I don't know what it is. Oh, actually, I do know what it is. I think this card around serenity and this innocence are kind of connected, and they talk about finding peace. And as I said, it's a time of year when we might be provoked by things, particularly people. And certainly many of us are struggling with stress at the moment. So that could be relevant for you in that sense. And I think this animal nature card can be one way on a practical level you can look for relief there. And the thinker card as well, it's talking about the ways we keep ourselves hostage, which does relate to that innocence card. So I guess in a very broad brushstroke here, we could say the cards are around the way we hold ourselves back in terms of we expect instant results for that practice card, and we beat ourselves up. So, and also some of these unhelpful, I was going to say unhealthy and change it to unhelpful, but I guess they're both relevant, ideas around money, so, and not feeling supported. That's it for the week. Thank you very much. I will put these on my social media as I do each and every day. My Instagram is at One Grounded Angel. My Facebook page is One Grounded Angel. The Lawnmower Man has stopped. I think it's a good sign. And I will look forward to reading for you again. Take care.